It is now Lima Time, a program designed to promote the transformation of the agricultural sector for improved income, food and nutrition security. Brought to you by the National Agricultural Information Services, NAIS. Stay abreast with the latest appropriate technologies and policies to increase your production and productivity in crop, nutrition, livestock and fisheries. Lima, moving the agriculture sector forward.
Ukunga waimba ukuire muleka kwati itunturu nga waipala kwati fe itunturu ya butano mbanga waikoma muchali uma mukatimbo ityakosa kanshi yakuposa fe fine wabula waiposa wayapambi ifo fine waisanga noma chakote kushani mbuto ilele nga tuchinje mbuto tufwaeko imbi kwena ine bulwele na ine nsangire mu ibara lyanje.
Very happy that the government through DMMU has actually come to the aid by distributing cassava cuttings to 2,500 farmers in northern and also Luapula province.
Programu isuma sana ya kuti atuletelo bunoshu usuma kubekala chalo.
We have two major important diseases now. Those are cassava mosaic disease and cassava brown streak disease.
Cassava brown streak disease, the first thing that we notice is that it starts with chlorotic spots. These are very small yellow spots. So if you look at this plant, you have leaves that have chlorotic spots.
Traditionally, cassava production was restricted to the northern, Luapula, northwestern and western provinces of Zambia, where it serves as the main staple food. In recent years, cassava production has extended to the eastern, thanks to my story, southern, Copperbelt, and Lusaka provinces.
Cassava is one of the most important food crops in Zambia, second to maize, and it is mainly grown by small-scale farmers. It is a source of income and serves as a staple food for most households, especially in northern Luapula and Mchinga provinces.
Today, over 500 million people in sub-Saharan Africa depend on maize for their livelihoods. However, the negative effects of climate change, frequently manifesting as prolonged dry spells, floods and pest emergencies, are negatively impacting maize production. Consequently, agriculture is diversifying towards climate-smart practices, which include the use of climate-resilient alternatives to maize. It is important to note that in Zambia, cassava ranks high among the most climate-resilient crops that provide the dietary caloric requirements. The reduced labor demands with respect to cassava production compared to maize, coupled with the recently expanded range of industrial uses for cassava, has led to increased interest in the production of the crop. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, Your Royal Highness, traditionally, cassava production was restricted to the northern, Luapula, northwestern and western provinces of Zambia, where it serves as the main staple food. In recent years, cassava production has extended to the eastern, thanks to my story, southern, Copperbelt, and Lusaka provinces, following increased demand for the crop. Government is further pleased to note that cassava production is additionally used in the brewing, Zambia breweries are here, mining, biofuel and sanitation industries. I hope the doctor will help us understand how cassava is used in mining. And this, of course, it is to run the industries there. Many stakeholders are increasingly recognizing the value of cassava, as evidenced by the growing interest of the various companies and organizations to promote cassava production, such as Zambia Breweries, Zongi International, Itawa Investments, Sunbed International, among others. Currently, annual demand for cassava flour in Zambia exceeds 1 million metric tons. Therefore, there is no doubt that the cassava subsector holds a great promise for economic development in the country.
But the cassava crop is under threat because of the outbreak of cassava brown streak disease, commonly known as Cbsd. The disease has caused significant crop losses in recent years, putting the livelihoods of farmers at risk. But the good news is that with proper management, the spread of Cbsd can be contained. Government recognizes the importance of cassava to the economy and to the livelihoods of the people. It is against this background that Zambia Agricultural Research Institute (ZARI), working with the Disaster Management and Mitigation Unit, has taken decisive action to control Cbsd. In Wapula and northern provinces, government launched a comprehensive program to control Cbsd, focusing on two main strategies: distribution of disease-free cassava planting materials and farmer education on disease identification and management. But how is Cbsd spread, and what are some of the signs and symptoms that farmers can look out for?
In Zambia is affected by two main diseases. The first one is cassava brown streak disease and also cassava mosaic disease. These two diseases are caused by different viruses. There are so many viruses that cause cassava mosaic disease. To differentiate the two diseases, I'll start with the cassava brown streak disease, which is prevalent in northern and Lopura provinces, particularly in Sama, Kaputa, Nchelenge, and Chiengi. Yeah. So the difference, if you're looking at the symptoms, to start with, if you look at the leaves, cassava brown streak disease, on the leaves, there's no distortion. You see the yellowing, particularly on the veins. The veins become yellow because of the viruses that affect the cassava plants. And then if you closely look at the stems, you see brown streaks along the stem. And this is where the name cassava brown streak comes from. It's because of the presence of the streaks along the stems. And then if you go to the roots, the disease causes rotting of the roots. You see brown lesions as you look at the cross-section of the root. So these are the symptoms to look for the disease, which I said it's cassava brown streak disease. So on the leaves, once again, there's no distortion. However, you see yellowing on the veins. And then on the stems, you see brown streaks along the stems. And then on the roots, you see lesions, the brown lesions. This is what the farmers normally see, the rotting of the roots. So then you notice that I said there are two diseases, cassava brown streak disease and cassava mosaic disease. Now, for the cassava mosaic disease, the symptoms on the leaves, as you see them in the field, you see distortions along the leaf margin, and you see the mosaic. Mosaic simply means colors of green and yellow patterns on the leaf. That's the difference between cassava brown streak disease and cassava mosaic disease. Cassava mosaic disease, the leaves are distorted along the margins, and you see patches of yellow and green for the leaves. And then if you look at the stems, there are no streaks. For the cassava mosaic disease, there are no streaks on the stems. If you dig the roots, you won't see any rotting on the roots for the plants that has been affected by cassava mosaic disease. However, the roots tend to be smaller in size because of the viruses affecting the cassava mosaic disease. So these are the two differences between the cassava mosaic disease and the cassava brown streak disease.
Tuweko amafya baleshingwana na ena mumabala aya tuti yalikwete amalwele ayanjele na tuti okubola n'obuswa bwalelya imishila shatute na tuti abola panshi.
Farmer education is another key component of government's program. Government has trained farmers about Cbsd management as a preventive measure.
Total number of farmers we have invited for the training, there are 500 farmers, and we are dividing them into zones. So here we are in zone 1. The next station we are going to be in zone 2, and then the zone 3. In my own side, I think I'll just emphasize on the management of the cassava crop. The number one management, I'll just talk about the planting area of the crop, and then the weeding of the crops, and then the area harvesting of the affected cassavas. I think the main techniques which we are going to talk about is the planting methods. Some farmers, they don't know how to plant the cassava. We are also going to talk about on how to identify the crop which is affected and how they can prevent the affected plants. I'm encouraging my farmers to destroy the cuttings which are affected, and they should also stop sharing the cuttings or transporting the cuttings from one place to another or from one field to another to avoid the spread of disease.
Idio batuletele tute batusambilisha efi ukweba okutira imputa mufuile mwalima apali 100 ukuluputa n'okuluputa apa mwabika lula 1 mita yakumana. So tuleto otele chiputulo okuti ififi ne bale tuwafuilisha batuwalilile.
The training we conducted very well in all the corners of the district in 16 camps, where we went with the people from Zari, Mansa and Chilanga, Lusaka, under the Ministry of Agriculture with the support from the DMMU. Yes, farmers have been trained on the production of cassava, and we are closely monitoring farmers in terms of the fields. We are able to monitor from all around the camp, from all the district camps. We are on the ground to monitor their fields to make sure that they produce the quality that we need as the nation.
Tuleta shechi nechi nepa tuleta ko tupepa. Mulandi tuleta otera mulandi wakwe bati pantu ubulwele bashe tusambilisha. Elo tatwa kwete okula tuishiba buno bwino. Nomba tupepa tuntu batuletera namalwele yo batibikirepo. Twakula yeshiba bwino kale twakula tinga twamabala twasenda twamona ubulwele buli patupepa apa. Twamona nobulwele buli mumabala mula twashiba ko bati akanshi ubuna bukwata ubulwele twatashani twafumyamo.
Actually, the farmers that have been trained with the support of Disaster Management and Mitigation Unit are very knowledgeable right now. Zari did a good job in ensuring that these farmers were trained. A total of actually 1,000 farmers have been trained, and these are seed growers. So we are very confident actually in this mass of our seed growers, the 1,000 that have been trained with the support from DMMU, that going forward, the way we grow cassava is going to be very different from the usual practices that we've had in the past. As we move forward, as we move amongst our farmers, monitoring the fields, and after the trainings that we have had with Azari, we are orienting our farmers on various practices, amongst which we're trying to inculcate to them that fields that we are growing anew with disease-free cuttings should not be close to fields that are already diseased. We should move completely away from those fields, a minimum distance of 100 meters, so that we ensure the new fields that are disease-free do not get infected by the old fields. And of course, we are also advising our farmers to ensure that as they plant new fields, they do not go back to fields that are already diseased to get cuttings. So we have advised our farmers to come to us also, so that we can link them with some other farmers that are growing disease-free, cuttings, especially outside of our district, because within Kaputa we do not have those seed growers. And of course we go further, because one practice that our farmers have here is to partially harvest cassava, which of course through the trainings they were advised that that is not a very good practice, because they leave that plant susceptible to disease to come in, especially Cbsd and mosaic disease.
In the trainings, there were a lot of awareness through trainings, and also farmers were being trained that they can share this information with their fellow farmers, and also this has been taken up through extension messages. Right now we are conducting field days. These are always popping up, questions and so on. So we are busy making this kind of awareness to the farmers. It's not a one-off sensitization or awareness, but this is more or less like part of the program now that we are doing in our daily activities. And also farmers, if you remember also under Ministry of Agriculture and Extension, we have also some officers that were trained to set up plant clinics where farmers can do disease and pest identification, and also looking at the possible solutions, and also through farmer field schools where farmers also are able to do pest and disease identification, and also looking at I think cost-effective measures to manage those pests and diseases. So these have been more or less like integrated in the mainstream of extension service delivery.
We are also doing print and radio and TV productions, so that as many as possible farmers are aware and are able to know and identify and recognize and manage these two diseases. So those are some of the interventions that we are doing as an institute.
The traditional and civic leaders have welcomed the initiatives by government which are meant to mitigate the challenges that the farmers are facing in cassava farming.
Hii programu isuma sana ya kutila kuti atuletera bunonshu usuma kubekala chalo ubulimi bwatu tebwali bwerera panu masana achiri cha kutotera nabekala chalo bali chipokelera amaka kuti twatwala obulimi bwesu pantanshi tetusitekere fye omataba yeka awe abachipokelera pantu kunuma kwali bulwere bwali kuli tute chalenga nokubwerera kunuma.
About 13,000 farmers have been affected, of which when we received Zari under the program that we initiated, because we lobbied support from the Disaster Management Committee, and we thank the government of His Excellency the President, Mr. Hakainde Hichilema, for responding on a timely basis to abate this vice. So the people, or the farmers, they have embraced the project, and they are ready to cope with the changing trends of the climate change and the disease that has invaded the district. So that I can put it on record that they have embraced it, they have received it with both hands.
Ndakwachinkha uyu mulimo wena walipokelelwa fya bwino era kabiri na trainings kwali kutraina bashibulimi pakuti bashibefyo bafuile balabo mfya uyu ni musango wa fikonkolo bantu mikonkolo yakunuma tute alebola.
As you may be aware, the cassava brown streak disease was first reported in 2017 in Zambia. Although the disease is currently restricted to districts in the northern parts of the country, chances of spreading to other districts and provinces are very high owing to the mode of transmission of the Kaja virus through diseased cuttings, combined with the clonally propagative nature of the cassava plant. The fastest means by which cassava brown streak disease spreads is through the exchange of disease cattle used for propagation of new cassava fields among farmers. This is a rampant practice in all our traditional cassava growing areas and can certainly worsen the spread and effects of the cassava brown streak disease. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, Your Royal Highness, recent appeals for government intervention from the most affected areas, including Kaputa and Chiengi districts, attest to the devastating effects of the cassava brown streak disease at household and community levels. The impacts of the cassava brown streak disease also span across the national and regional levels and culminate into important regulatory factors with significant policy implications. The incidence, severity, impact, and potential for spread of the cassava brown streak disease to other provinces of Zambia calls for urgent need for a coordinated and collaborative response to prevent the cassava subsector from collapsing. The level of investment and efforts pumped into the subsector thus far need not be wasted. Stakeholders must direct their efforts to more effectively respond to the cassava brown streak disease. Although the most sustainable and effective way to address cassava brown streak disease is through the use of resistant cassava varieties, it is not the most immediate response, as research requires time to develop adapted varieties that confer adequate resistance.